101.5. No wonder I feel so awful. Oh boy, maybe I've got COVID-19 after all this time. Or maybe I'm lucky and it's just the flu. Good evening, Toastmasters and guests. That's how my day started a few weeks ago on Sunday, February 28th. I could tell I had a raging fever. The thermometer confirmed it, and I felt awful. Couldn't sleep well, got up, took some Tylenol, eventually said my prayers at home. It was the first day I'd missed morning services, I think, since the restart in the middle of the pandemic after everything had been shut down. But I felt awful. I went downstairs for my Sunday morning Zoom class. Halfway through, I was falling asleep. All day, pretty much stayed in bed, just got up to drink some water and take more Tylenol. But I figured, you know what? So many people have been through all this. I'll get through it. No big deal. Monday morning, I get up. I'm feeling a little bit better. Oh, down to 100. Great. They're all right. Maybe it's the flu. Maybe it's COVID. Get through it. Tuesday, about 10 a.m. I'm getting up and about. All of a sudden, I felt this sense of relief. I felt cool again in the temperature sense. I thought, wow, maybe this is finally it. Maybe it was just a couple of days of the flu and I'll get through this. I'll stay at home a few days just for everybody worried about COVID, just in case. And that'll be it. No such luck. That was a positive. Wednesday morning, oh my goodness, that was a negative. I get up in the middle of the night and my leg is stiff. I didn't want to look at it. I didn't want to deal with it. It's 3 a.m. I just need to use the toilet. Well, a few hours later, I got up for real. And oh my goodness, my leg was all red and swollen and puffy and ugh. A few hours later, off to the urgent care. They took a look and said, take some more Tylenol and go to the ER. Off to Holy Cross ER. They took a look at it and said, you've got cellulitis, which I've heard of before. Never had it. Didn't really think that happened to people like me, but well, it does. It can happen to anyone. So they started pumping me. They actually had 2 IVs, both arms. They started pumping me up with antibiotics and doing all kinds of tests. Got my first negative COVID test. That was a positive. A few hours later, got my second negative COVID test. That was a positive. But in the meantime, the doctor's looking at my leg and how fast this thing was growing, even while I was in the hospital. And they're like, oh my goodness, this could be nasty. They started talking about necrotizing fasciitis, which is indeed as nasty as it sounds. And the concern is that you could have a cellulitis on the outside or something that looks and seems like cellulitis. But on the inside, it could be something much, much worse. So off I went down the hall to my first ever CT scan. That was inconclusive. An hour later, off down the hall to my first MRI. That was also inconclusive. Well, you know what is conclusive to figure this out? The gold standard is to give you a little bit of surgery. But of course, there's no such thing as a little bit of surgery. So the surgery is they put you to sleep, general anesthesia. They make a couple of little cuts in your leg. Well, maybe it's little for the doctor, not so much for the patient. And they see what comes out. And depending on what comes out, they know whether it's just cellulitis or whether it's something far more serious. And then they have to do more surgery and figure out how to do the best they can with what you've got. The doctor, though, was very smart. The doctor said, if you've got to, I'm really worried about this. And if this is the worst case scenario, Holy Cross is a wonderful place for regular cellulitis. But if this is really bad, I want you down at George Washington, or at Hopkins. So off I went for my first ever ambulance ride, not the midnight ride of Paul Revere, the midnight ride of Silver Spring Fire and Rescue. That was fun. And off into George Washington Hospital. And they took a look and they explained the situation again. And it got a little bit more serious and a little bit more negative as they were explaining it more. An hour later, the surgeon had written his initials on my leg. We identified it. That's standard protocol now, just in case. Make sure everything's done right. And next thing you know, I was asleep. And the next thing I knew, I was awake in the hospital, in the recovery room, next to this very nice nurse, Nicole, getting me things to eat and drink because I couldn't for several hours before. And it turned out she was a Republican. I know that won't thrill all of you, but that was good for me. And it was good for her because all her Democrat friends, all her Republican friends had left town in the last year. So we had fun conversations. And then we went on for a week in the hospital of recovery. The worst of the negative was behind me because even though I had this big deal with a week of IV antibiotics, at least I knew that the worst was not happening. That was a big positive. I did have 2 more negatives over the course of the week, 2 more negative COVID tests. Those were positive. I had some other negatives though, because there were different times when they were talking about different kinds of things that could cause a sudden cellulitis like this. And the doctors really had me scared at some points. But fortunately, in the end, it seems to have all worked out. I probably saw every doctor in the hospital except for the OBGYNs. And I learned pretty early on to make the best of what you had. Kosher food in the hospital food isn't great to start with. Kosher hospital food's even worse. But you know what? They're taking care of it. They're heating it up for me. When they make mistakes, they go back and get me something else. Really not so bad. I learned to adjust and to adapt and say, you know what? Everybody here is to take care of me. And I was trying to be nice to them. Some of the patients weren't so nice to the nurses. I made sure every time, whether it was a nurse, a doctor, the transport to the x-rays and the CT scans, the CT scan x-ray technicians, you name it, to say thank you, because I knew that they were all trying to help me get better. And I hope that positive attitude rubbed off on them. I know their attitudes in helping rubbed off on me. And finally, after a week in the hospital, after having been a few days sick at home, I got to go home. And I'm still recovering, but basically it was a 2-week process where I had to learn and adjust and realize, be thankful and have the positive attitude for all the people who were there to help. All the technology that was there to help was amazing. And to realize that a mostly healthy life, even if I had this little glitch, is a truly positive thing. Thank you.